This recording going. Awesome. Thank you so much. All right. Good morning. Today we're on part 3 of our listing mastery class. And today we'll be covering the commission, the objection handling, and any additional questions that you guys have. So let's get started. In our previous classes, we covered the best mindset along with the practical tools that you'll need to convey your value proposition. In addition, we learned about asking the right questions to understand the prospect's motivations and to determine what they are concerned about with regards to selling their home. And we discussed ways to position our past successes as proof of how our systems work and to qualify our value to their bottom line. We also learned how to deflect commission questions to the end of the discussion, so you have an opportunity to share your value with the seller. And that's very crucial in the listing presentation. Commission always wants to be, you should always deflect the commission question to the very end. If you start getting into the numbers of what you're going to charge, or you start getting into that debate before you've had a full opportunity to share all the value that you're going to bring, you're going to have a much more difficult discussion, and it's going to be, they're going to have a harder time understanding where you're coming from. All right. So again, I want to make sure you have the right mindset and that you have considered your commission. If you internalize this, I believe you'll have the confidence and therefore the conviction to sell yourself on what you're worth. Remember, in negotiations, the one who believes more strongly in their position is the one who wins. So let's make sure you have the right mindset. So it's often said that time is money, but time is far more valuable than money. You only get one life, and once each second has passed, you can never recapture it. You cannot grow time in the way that you can grow your money. As a real estate agent, you owe it to yourself to maximize the return on investment of that precious and finite asset you have, which is time. And this is important, even like for this meeting, you want to get something out of this meeting that's valuable for you. When you're sitting in front of a client, you're going to take them on and take on that project and take on that task that they're looking to do. There's a lot of things that you could be doing with that time. You could be spending time with your family, your loved ones, doing something else that brings you the same sort of value. So it's really important that we are conscientious of this, and that you really understand that if we're not claiming or gaining what we need, with that time spent, we're losing out, and we have that opportunity cost. So most of the people that we'll be dealing with will be employees, and many times they do not have a strong understanding of what business or entrepreneur must do to bring value to the marketplace. So let's review their world with regards to earnings and put into perspective of ours. In this example, let's say your seller is an employee and earns a little over $100,000 per year. That would be based on like a $50 an hour job that works 40 hours a week. They are probably paid twice a month. They'll most likely have some benefits such as vacation pay, sick time, medical benefits, and probably some type of retirement program such as a 401k. At this pay, they probably have a combination of education and experience in their line of work, and have some latitude in decision-making, but most likely it's limited. They are paid regularly, and their performance is most likely based on task and not necessarily results, although if they are generally considered ineffective, they'll probably not last too long in their position. So if that person earns $140,000 or $104,000 a year, but we all know that's not what ends up in their bank account at the end of the year. They'll deduct some amount to contribute to their retirement, hopefully at least the amount that their employer will match, and they'll have to pay federal and state income taxes, which last year for the income level that this would be around a 30% effective tax rate. And their take home or net would be about $68,000 per year, or about $5,700 per month. So even though this is what they earn, this is not what it cost their employer to keep them in that position. So what do I mean? So that employer, in addition to the $404,000, will need to fund those other benefits and pay additional taxes on their behalf. So please note these are rough estimates, but it is in line with what the average is that it costs an employer to pay someone the salary and these benefits. Also keep in mind that these figures do not include any of the costs for giving the employee a workspace, computer, phone, office supplies, etc. So you can get the picture. If we went to that person and said, you earn $145,000 a year, they would be like, no, I don't. Yet in reality, if this is what the employer cannot justify, at least making this much, they're not going to keep this person, employed. Likewise, as an independent contractor, you have to think like an employer. Your business has to generate enough revenue to give you the gross salary that's necessary to meet your needs, but also enough money to fund your medical and retirement needs. Also, if you are not, how can you justify staying in business for yourself versus taking a position where you earn something like this? Okay. So similarly, when you look at your commission, the gross commission paid to the brokerage is not what you keep. Please note that these are rough averages, and I blended some cost, but we have fees that are deducted for our corporate office, which helps fund the apparatus, that marketing apparatus, that when we take a listing, the world will know about it. In addition, we have board fees splits that are used to fund our office space, support staff, and some office supplies. And for listings, you use part of your commission to pay for professional photography and marketing. And the net in this example is $4,200 based on a $10,000 gross commission. And then you still have to pay towards retirement, medical insurance, pay state and federal income taxes, including the full burden of Social Security, which is double that of an employee. And some of the costs are fixed. So if you cut your commission, you're really taking it off the bottom line. So think about this, for instance, some of these fees and stuff are going to be fixed for the year. And although, as you do, more transactions, you cost average it down. But the bottom line is someone comes in and says, hey, will you cut your commission? You got to understand you're taking maybe, let's say a 1% would knock this down considerably, and your net on the bottom would be a lot less. So 1 second, please. All right. So as we get into the discussion, commission discussion, it's more, we're going to get into more pointed questions that are designed to get them to think about the things they have not thought about before, and start with what they consider when they're thinking about what to offer the other agent. So, so when I frame the commission discussion in terms of seller can understand, even if you have to walk them through an example similar to what we just did, when they list their home, part of the commission that you are proposing will be shared with the other brokerage. And that amount, like a salary, is like a salary that's posted on a job posting. So when the seller needs to understand is that what they are getting with that commission, and they have to understand how it benefits them not to post a discounted amount. So what is the seller getting? Well, they're getting professionalism. They want to attract good agents that have done the work preparing their buyers to write competitive offers and educate them on the market. They want a buyer and agent that has a good working relationship versus someone that's just picked up a lead online who's rushing to get an offer and have a buyer who, let's say, is thrown off because they've not had the time to build the trust with that agent. And the more competitive the commission is, the more likely they will attract a pool of good offers from seasoned agents who will know how to get the transaction done smoothly. Okay. So how will that look in a listing presentation? I always start with the amount that they are going to offer the other agent. I want them to understand why it's important and to be able to discuss this in an impersonable way. I want them I'm not fighting for me, I'm fighting for the reasons that they want to pay more for that other person. And so psychologically, what it's doing is you're basically having the fight or the discussion about what you want to do for the other agent and why that's important. And it's not really saying what you want, which has, for you, because that, that has, what do you want to say, kind of like the self-serving reasons. So you can get, you'll get an objection from the seller that may sound like something like this. So I only want to pay or offer 2% or 1% to the other agent. Well, actually, you probably do not. To you, it's only a 1% or 2% savings. But if the agent but for the agent, it's a 33% to a 66% reduction in gross revenue for their business. Imagine if you were laid off from a job that you were paid $90,000 a year and you were looking for another similar position, but the new company was only offering 60 or 30K per year. How likely would you be willing to apply? And that's kind of like a similar proportion to like what we're looking at when we're talking about a 3% commission, 3% being like 90, 2/3 of that would be like 60 and 30K being, that 1/3. So only the agents that are desperate and unseasoned are going to bring buyers, or they're going to have a contract in place that will require the buyer to make up any gap in commission. The unseasoned agents will have an unprepared and uneducated buyer, and those people tend to tie up transactions or they fall apart for completely foreseeable reasons. I mean, think about when we're going through our buyer consultation, or when you're going out and you're building that rapport with your client, you're showing them houses. Hopefully you've been having discussions with them about the buying process, about what happens going through loans, what happens during the home inspections. If that agent is someone who's a discounter who needs to, doesn't have really strong relationships with those buyers and just trying to pick up whoever they can as quickly as they can, they're not going to have those conversations. And then when you get into escrow, that buyer is going to be, less prepared. And so when certain things pop up, a seasoned agent's already going to know and be able to, have a discussion with that buyer to prepare them so that when those inevitable things occur, they already have spoken to it and worked through them in such a way that, they've overcome before it happens, so to speak. So you want to offer a strong enough commission that is going to draw in all agents with well-qualified buyers, and you want a frenzy. And here we have lots of choices, and where I can vet the best offers and agents and get into a bidding war between those best. We need to get at least 2 highly motivated and well-qualified buyers to fight for your property to find the maximum price for your home. So then usually what I'll do is then I would look at, kind of what the average commissions are, in the area that these listings are, so I can kind of put this in perspective. So let's just say, as an example, I might say in your neighborhood, the average commission offered for buyers is 2.5%. If you offer 3%, can you see how that will draw in the best agents and get you a higher price with only 0.5% more investment? And, and remember, going back to some of our previous classes, one of the things that I'm going to have as part of my listing presentation is about how my listings have outperformed the other agents, in the market at that time, and how I got a higher selling price. And so ultimately, the bottom line is I'm going to net you more. And part of that was because of all the things that I was able to do, because I was able to get that commission. And so again, when we're talking about only a small amount, like let's say 0.5% more, if I can turn around and say, if you invest 0.5% more, but you might get 3 to 5% more on your bottom line, that makes sense. It no longer becomes an expense, it becomes an investment. So then I would, if they can see that and they can understand it and they're buying into it, then I'd be like, great. That's why I do 6% total. I'm going to bring in all the tools that we've discussed and make a substantial investment of my commission back into this endeavor, while incentivizing other agents to bring in their most well-qualified buyers. My track record speaks for itself. Are we ready to move forward? So far from what we've talked about with the commission, can you guys see how that progression would work? And does that kind of make sense? I mean, does it see how the logic of it kind of builds on itself? Well, where we're starting off and we're saying, yeah, things cost money, but look, at the end, you're going to end up with more. And let me show you how that works. And here's some examples of what I've done. And then putting the perspective of kind of like, this person, they think that you guys, as an example, well, doesn't your broker give you leads? Aren't you just like, the waiter who goes out and writes the contract? Aren't you salaried? A lot of times they don't even have a perspective of what it means to be a real estate agent, that you're, an independent business person. You're generating that revenue. You had to go out and find them. And so that's a lot different than the world that they live in. And we're showing that, look, the bottom line is our professionals that we bring is going to bring that value in. But let's say they push back on, and a lot of times what they may do is they may understand, yeah, it benefits me for the other person because that's what we've talked about. But maybe they may want to push back on you and say, well, can you, give me a little break on your side? And so I would come back with something like, I would love to discount, but the fact is these systems cost money, lots of money. Plus, don't you want to incentivize the agent who's defending your list price at least as much as the person who'll be trying to knock it down? But I saw a commercial where they'll do it for a small commission or no commission. Aren't you guys doing exactly the same thing, but just for the same money, or for just for more money? Or I actually had, this one is literally from a conversation I had one time during a listing presentation. I had someone come back with, well, I understand when houses were 100,000 and you guys got 3%, but prices have been going through the roof. Why should I pay as much in commission when another company is going to sell my house for 2% or not? If they bring in lowball offers, I just won't sell. So either you're giving up something in the way of service, or you're making up for it in some other way. Do you know how? So many brokers will charge hidden fees. I have seen up to 8% on the sales commission, on sales price. And this is something, and this specific amount, this 8% goes back to online brokers. I saw a contract recently for Zillow where they were charging 7.5%. It was not commission, it was other fees. And that's, I mean, think about that. That line item alone is already far more than what I'm charging at 6%. And yet that was just one of the fees that they were going to charge, quote unquote, under their low commission, program. So yes, they may be offering 2% commission or even no commission, but look at the fine print of their contract carefully. You'll see that this is not the only thing that they are charging. My quote is straightforward. Okay, but let's just say, for argument's sake, let's say you found one who cut their commission without any hidden fees. What are you giving up? You are giving up something that will make a difference in your sales price. That agent will need to spend a lot less time on your deal because they'll have to do more volume to generate the same amount of revenue that I do. And that cutting of corners with time and resources will lead to you getting less for your home. And this is every argument I'm coming back for is, what's the impact to them? You're going to get less for your home. Your net's going to be less if you don't go down this path. I've got a track record that says if you invest, you get higher rates of return. Here's examples where I've done it. And if you take that away, it doesn't just naturally fall that your house is going to magically come to that, amazing price that everyone else does. So the proof is in the pudding. Every one of my listings have sold between 5% and 10% more than the comparables. Clearly, the market could support a higher price than what the other sellers got. Their agents just didn't get the job done. How do I get it done? One way is not rolling over when the discussion of price comes up. If the agent's willing to roll over on their fees in order to get the listing, don't you think that they will roll over on price when it comes to negotiating with your buyers? And how true is that? I mean, my experience has been is that agents who are not comfortable with the negotiation process, or that have not internalized their value, when they get stumped with a commission objection, they will tend to roll over because they don't want to lose that deal. Well, the same thing happens when they're working with the seller. Maybe they haven't put all the things together that, because of their inexperience. And now they're in a situation where the seller wants an unrealistic price. They're not getting the offer, so they're only getting in a small offer, and they're going to be, looking for a way just to get this thing done. And yet, because of my track record and because of what I do, I'm using the examples built from that to say, I don't roll over on it. I'm not going to just simply walk away, and I can prove why you should, continue to invest. Okay, so what are some of the other objections that you might get? I've promised my friend, cousin, or other agent that I would sell with them. Okay, I appreciate your loyalty, and that's a quality I respect in people. But let me ask you, when you say you promised, did you sign the listing agreement with them? Okay, and let's just say, for an example, they said no. So you've talked about working together, but you've not come to an agreement on what that would look like or what exactly that would cost, correct? And despite your relationship, you felt compelled to shop around to see what other agents could offer you, right? I have given you a clear plan of what I can do, examples of how my strategies will earn you top dollar for your home, and exactly what I will charge to make that happen. And yet the friend, family, or agent that you've promised hasn't even done this yet. If we sign and I do not follow through with anything that I've committed, I would imagine we would be sitting down for a talk, right? And I say I imagine because that has never happened with any of my clients. On the other hand, there have been a time when you've decided to buy something or do something with a friend or family member, and when a critical moment came up, they had some excuse for not following through. And that wasn't with one of the biggest assets that you have, right? So do you want to work with a professional with a proven track record, or run the risk of losing a good friendship or having Thanksgiving be really uncomfortable? That's kind of a way to kind of soften it and kind of say, put it in perspective. Do you want to really have a problem with this? And let's say have a family member that's the agent, and get them really thinking about it. So if we decide to move forward today, I'll get them a nice gift. And when we close, to help smooth things over between the two of you. Fair enough? And on that last one, I've used that line when you can kind of see they've gone 90%. And there's just that kind of last minute kind of like, oh, this is, it makes perfect sense to go and sign now, but it's really going to suck because I'm going to hurt their feelings. Doing something like that is just a kind of way to kind of make that kind of go away and make them feel more better about taking the next step. Okay. What about some other objections? Let's say I've talked with other agents and they said they could give me a higher price than the range that you have suggested. Because remember, when we talked previously, I never give a specific price. I always give a range. And the reason we do that is because no one knows exactly what the market is. Market is constantly fluctuating like any other stock or commodity that you have. And the bottom line is when we look at our comparables, that's just simply where the market has been. Not does necessarily say where the market is going. So I would say something like, I'm glad you brought this up. To be clear, this is simply an estimate of what I think the market can bear for your home. Nobody has a crystal ball. My plan is designed to maximize whatever price your home can get in the market at the time, whether it be within that range or above. I just don't make promises that I can't fulfill. And unfortunately, this industry is full of agents who will make whatever promise it takes to get their sign put in a yard. Then when the overpriced home sits on the market and the seller is holding on to that unrealistic expectation, the listing expires. In fact, I know many top agents who have expiration rates upward of 50%. And I don't know if you guys have ever gone through the exercise, and if you ever want to go through the exercise, or if you're starting to work a specific farm and you want me to show you how to do this, I'll be happy to make an appointment with you. But it's interesting to actually pull up the statistics or sales of agents who've worked in an area for a long time. And this is one advantage that you'll have when you're dealing with top agents. A lot of them have expiration rates. And I can tell you there are many agents in this area that you'll be going up against that have rates that are sometimes as high as 50%. And really, when you delve into the reasons why, it's because of exactly what I've said here. They will say or do whatever it takes just to get a sign in their yard, because even if they don't sell it, the perception is that person's doing a lot of activity, which makes it easier at the next presentation that they go into to try to get more business. But the bottom line is a lot of times those people aren't selling houses the same way that that I would say that the type of agent that a seller is really looking for will do. So, and I use a very personal story for those of you who've been on some other trainings before. I know I've mentioned this, but I say I've only had one listing expire on me, and that was because the seller had an unreasonable expectation regarding price. And the only reason I took that listing at that price is because I've been sleeping next to her for the last 20 years. So for those of you who know the story, the only place I've ever expired on was my own listing, because my wife wanted this crazy amount for the house. I'm like, all right, let's go ahead and try. But it didn't work out, and she wasn't willing to move unless she would get it. So do you want an agent who's going to give you realistic expectations and can get your home sold, or one who cares more about putting a sign in your yard? And so again, the specific stories that you use and that you pepper in with this, you can mix them up, make these your own, make the language your own. But the formula of how to do these objections, how to handle them, is to, number one, pop some holes into their belief systems that are flawed and show them examples of where your system and what you're offering has actually worked. And it's giving them something to think about. So anyway, what are some other objections you might run into? But I really think I can get more for my home. Okay, so Now, if they're coming up with this, hopefully you've done a really, really good job with going through the CMA and showing the prices and that kind of stuff. And assuming that you have, then I would say, okay, what price, did you want to list at? Well, I was thinking, whatever that price was. Okay, if you had a bunch of showings with no offers or no showings at all, what would you do then? Because I want to get an understanding. I want to get into their head of what they're thinking about. You want to go for this crazy, ridiculous price. And I've already had a discussion about the different ways to price a house where, you can either price it too high where you get no offers, you can price it low where you get multiple offers, or we, have multiple offers that take you to that one offer that makes the most sense for them and gets them the maximum price. So I'm assuming I've already had this conversation. And so we're revisiting this and drilling into further. So I want to understand where their motivation is with this. If they turn around and say, well, then I would be willing to drop my price, then I know their motivation is still there. They're just really trying to maximize what they're getting. So how would I deal with that? Okay, then let's do this. I will do all the things that I proposed. And if you do all the things I have asked in order for you to get top dollar, I will list it at that price that you want. In 3 weeks, which is an eternity in the market, if we do not have any offers, we'll talk about dropping the price to, and then have a strategy in place and an explanation of the target price then that you want. The purpose of this and kind of dissecting this a little bit more, what I'm doing is I'm honoring what they want. And number 2, willingness to work with them. And 3, let's have a plan in place when things don't go well. What I'm hoping that they're going to say is, I would much rather them come in with the right pricing to begin with. But if they're not, and if they're within the range of what is potentially reasonable and they're willing to adjust, then at least what I want to do is I want to keep them in the game and be that agent to help them through that process. But I'm going to also have a little bit of disclaimer as part of this. So I've given them a plan saying, hey, look, we can honor what you say, but we'll drop the price, or we'll have at least a discussion of dropping the price in 3 weeks. And because you can sit there and say most houses, in the current market are getting, multiple offers and going under contract within a week. So if we've waited 3 weeks, we've clearly tested the market, and what's going, the market has spoken to you by that time. So what I'm going to add then is I'm going to say, my concern is that if we go live above the market, we'll be chasing it down and you'll run the risk of missing out and getting that top dollar. I want to honor your instincts, but we need to work within guidelines of proven strategies. Is that fair enough? So that way I can still get them to sign. I can still get them to move forward with me. And I have a plan in place that it's not going to lead to failure, because I'm still going to have to make an investment in things like the marketing, the photos, and so on and so forth. So I need to have some sort of assurance, that they're actually going to be willing to work inside with what is realistic. I've seen a lot of times, sometimes with agents, that when they get to this point, if they're not willing to go into that range, they're quick to walk away. And I wouldn't say that you should walk away. I try to do everything I can to whittle it down to see, is there any possible solution that we have here before I step away? But if I were to get, let's say in this scenario, if the person were to come back and say, no, I don't want to, I won't drop my price, I'm just not going to do it, then I have to make a decision on, does it make more sense to risk it, or is it too much of a risk for me what I can bear? Because sometimes you can have situations where houses just sit and they're just never going to sell at the price that the seller wants. And are you willing to put that investment into, all those things that we spend money on, along with the time and everything else, just not to have it go anywhere? And then you have to make your decision on what makes sense for you. Okay. We'll just sell the home ourselves and pay 3% agent to the agent that finds us a buyer. Okay, so this is kind of like someone who wants to be like a FSBO, and they're thinking, well, I can handle my side of the negotiations, and we'll incentivize an agent to, has all the things that you're talking about. Okay, so here's how I would address that objection. A lot of sellers consider the do-it-yourself route. You can find endless vids online how to do anything yourself. The problem is, in real estate, doing it wrong is more expensive than paying a professional to do it right the first time. California is the most litigious state, and 75% of lawsuits related to real estate transactions occur in Southern California. Do you have any idea what the average lawsuit cost? And I don't know if you guys have ever been involved in any kind of lawsuits or ever had the pleasure of going through it. I can tell you right now, talking with attorneys, if it goes to court and you do like full depositions and all that kind of stuff, you're looking at over $80,000 for like the typical basic lawsuit. It's a tremendous amount of money. And even if you never make it to full-blown court and you go to something like mediation or something else, it's going to be tens of thousands of dollars. It's very rarely do you get out. The only people that win in lawsuits or any kind of litigation are the lawyers. So what you're trying to do in this is you're trying to get them to really think about this. Is my 6% really all that expensive? Plus, when I'm probably going to get you 10% more than if you go with the competition? Or do you want to do it yourself and save all the money and potentially run this risk of having to hire a lawyer at this price? So do you have? So most of the recent complaints filed are related to seller disclosures, and this is true. So in California, the law favors buyers over sellers and tenants over landlords. And so even if this is the first time they're selling a property, this is something that's very digestible and understandable to them. They may not understand the implications of sellers and buyers, but they certainly have heard things in the news regarding tenants and landlords. And it's something that will resonate with them. So then I would further build on that by saying, whether you do it yourself or hire a professional, you are legally have the same obligations to the buyer. And that is true. The seller, even if they don't use CAR forms, have to deliver to the buyer certain statutory disclosures. They have to spell out certain things. And if they don't do that right, it could potentially cost them a lot of money if there's a problem that comes up later. So my system is designed to mitigate those risks by making sure we have all your compliance issues taken care of, even before you place your home on the market. So for those of you who've been in other classes, that's why we talk about, like, when you have a listing, we get all the disclosures done. We have discussion about the things that they've done with the property and that kind of stuff. We want to have all that stuff nice and tidy even before we put the house on the market. That way, if there's anything that comes up and that we discover as agents as we're going through that process, we can mitigate that and fix it or do whatever we need to before we start putting it on the market and start accruing days on market. Because once you do that, it's kind of like shelf life of milk. You produce the milk and now it's on the shelf. The longer that milk sits there, the more it's getting close to that expiration date. So navigating those waters is a full-time job, and very few agents have the combination of experience, support, and connections to the dozen of experts that you may need during a transaction that I do. So again, that's differentiating yourself, getting them to think about, hey, you may need a lot of different resources. And suddenly that commission is starting to get whittled down to think, gosh, maybe it's a good investment. It's a lot smaller than what if I have to go out and try to do these things, on my own and try to obtain that help. Okay, so what are some other objections? We want to think it over, or we still need to interview one more agent. And a lot of times they may have even told you that you were going to be the last agent. And so now suddenly they're kind of waffling on this. So usually if you're getting the sort of the think it over kind of objection, really what that's saying is that they're not convinced. And you're at the end of the presentation, they're still not buying into it. And I have found that this is typically the person that doesn't ask a lot of questions during the whole thing. They're the silent types. And so either they're not liking what they're hearing and they're not still believing you or establish that trust to have an honest discussion. So we got to break down that wall. So I can appreciate the fact that you want another opinion, but I suspect this is about something else. Mind if I share with you? Somehow, if I have not completely convinced you that I can sell your home and net you the most, right? I want to hit this right on. I want to show them that I'm the type of person that when there's a problem, that I'm willing to have an honest discussion about it. Let's get it out in the open. This will usually dislodge, whatever issue they're having. So what specifically is stopping you from putting me to work tonight? And then they're going to go through whatever it is, and you've got to drill down into it. So if it's something you feel like you've already covered, or if it's, and you feel like we just need to work on this some more, then I might pose a question of, so if we can find a solution that makes sense for you with regards to this, would you be ready to move forward this evening? And if they say no, then there's something else. And you got to continue to work that until you understand, well, what is the pool of all the things that they still have concerns about? You want to get that, open. But if they turn around and they say, yes, yeah, if we can figure out this, then yeah, we're ready to sign, then good, let's talk about this and let's have a real discussion about what it's going to take in order to get them satisfied, or to, have a better understanding of why you want to go down the path that you're suggesting. Does that make sense? Okay. So what about some other objections? We really like the staging on, one of the other listings that you did or something else they saw. The other agents said that they will include this as part of their fees. Will you do the same? So this is kind of like where they're now trying to, compete you against the other agent, and they're probably doing it now. They're doing it now more on the specific offering and that kind of stuff. And maybe this agent is including it. So then I would kind of go back to the last objection. I want to find out if, is this like sort of like the last deal breaker that's going to keep us from jumping that hurdle and getting it. So I'm going to ask them, if we're able to come to an agreement on including staging as part of my package, are you ready to put me to work for you? And so hopefully the answer is yes. Okay, great. I have a program where I include staging as part of my bid. You can get the highest rate of return on staging when it's done at the time that we are taking the professional photographs for marketing, and the first 2 weeks that the home is on the market. Because let's face it, most people, when they see a property, they're looking online. And so having your staging in place at the time that you're doing those pictures that are going to be used on the MLS, that's when you want to have that staging there. That's going to give people the emotional connection to the property. Likewise, in the first 2 weeks, that's when the most well-qualified and motivated buyers are going to be coming through the property, and where the property will benefit by having that staging there. So taking that one step just to kind of understand that a little bit better, usually the person that gets the house, the buyer that actually will win that bid, is the person that's been in the market for a while. And it's usually they've been beat up by the market. They've had a chance to kind of marinate and kind of align themselves. And they're now, after, let's say a month or two, are now starting to write offers that are more competitive. They kind of get the whole, we may have to, not do it with appraisal contingencies. Yeah, I kind of understand now why we got to go above list price. List price is just a measure of seller, motivation. It's not, doesn't say anything about the property. And yeah, I'm trying to find out what makes sense for me. So that kind of thing. So in that first 2 weeks is when you're going to get the most likely buyers. After that, staging tends to go up, and the prices tend to only climb, because staging is a function of how much you do and for how long you have it at the property. So what I'm trying to do is, if I'm going to have to do this as part of, my bid, and I'm going to have to include this, what I want to do is use this in the most efficient manner to get the most bang for our buck. So after it's been on the market, or the stage has been in place, the fees only climb, thus reducing the return on investment. Does that make sense? And then I would say, great. So I'll pay for the period of staging, and all that I need from you is an agreement that I will represent you on your Up Lake property. And if you decide that you no longer makes sense for you to sell your home after we put it on the market and that staging's in place, then that would be the only time that you would be obligated to pay for the staging. So basically what I'm going to say is, I'll give you what you want under these conditions. And it's going to require two things. Whenever I'm negotiating something, if you're asking for something, then I'm going to need to get something in order, if I'm having to give you something more than I usually do, I'm going to ask for something in return, or to offset. So in this case, what I'm going to do is I'm going to leverage the staging in order to have them say, look, sign a buyer broker agreement. I'm going to put a rate in that makes sense for me to go shopping for them. And I've now got my next paycheck after this listing, based simply on the investment of me putting out some money for staging. Likewise, if they decide, because sometimes this happens, you can have a situation where for whatever reason a house doesn't sell, or maybe they change their mind. I want to have some sort of safety measure in place that they're the ones that have signed the agreement with the staging company, that, hey, if we end up having to pull this out, or if, let's say during the course of the listing, they get pissed off at me, I want their name on the bottom line. And they'll, it'll be in our listing contract that if they decide not to sell, then they're the ones that are going to be responsible for it. If they're highly motivated to sell and they're already made that decision, for them, that's not a big deal, and they're willing to accept that risk. So So once I've offered this, this is usually not a hard, what do you want to say, countermeasure to get them to buy into this. Okay, so what are some of the other objections? So what if I decide not to do staging, but have you represent me on both transactions? Will you cut your commission then? Pretty sly seller. They're kind of taking the thing that you offered and try to mix it up and try to send it back to do something else. Okay, so the way I would handle this, I would say, unfortunately, I'm not able to do that. Though staging is an additional expense for me, it is an investment with returns. It will make the process of selling your home easier while giving you a higher sales price. It's a win-win. I'm talking about the benefit to me. I'm talking about the benefit to the seller. On the other hand, simply reducing my commission will take away resources to make the process smoother, which only adds work to my plate while yielding less money for your home. It's a lose-lose. So I want to reiterate the point that the reason I'm not doing this is because they're not going to net as much. It's going to make this harder. So I'm not giving my commission up. If you want to walk down this, you don't want to have staging because you don't want to pay for it, not a problem. But it's still, I've got to do a certain amount of work based on the basket of things that I have available to me. And if you want to take those away, then I'm willing to do the work, but it's not going to yield less in the fees that I charge. And then what I want to do is I want to build this and just kind of emphasize this a little bit more, just kind of draw this point home. It's important to understand that I have a boutique style practice intentionally designed to work with a smaller pool of value-seeking clients. People who work with me expect amazing results with a very hands-on approach. If I start cutting my rate, I'll have to cut my service, and then I'll be just like every other agent. So I'm trying to reiterate the fact that I'm different than the other agents. I like the verbiage of boutique style practice as a nice way of saying I'm not a top producing agent. It is a way because there are agents that like to do a lot of volume. And the fact of the matter is, depending on what your vision for your business is, maybe that's not you. Or if you haven't gotten to that level yet, it's a great way to say, hey, look, I like working with a small number of people. It's like Louis Vuitton. They don't have, it's not the same way. Anyway, all right. So what else? Some other objections you might run into. Now, hopefully you've had this conversation, I guess previously, but maybe they might bring it up again, or maybe they didn't cover it well enough. They didn't really understand. But I do want to list my home until I found a replacement property. Okay. Is this because you don't want to have to do 2 moves or become homeless? I'm asking a deeper question because I want to understand what is it about this that concerns you? So let's say, and this is a lot of times, the reason I mention this here is because that's usually one of the 2 most common reasons. So let's say they say yes. So I understand many of the sellers have the same concerns when they are considering to sell. However, we in the industry have seen how this has adverse effects on the seller game plan. And with this approach, the seller will end up getting less for their home and having to pay a lot more for the replacement property. In addition, they will become more susceptible to having to make concessions that they do not want in order to keep those less than ideal deals together. How does that work? So imagine if you found a property and you actually got the seller to sign on the dotted line that they'll accept your offer, but you've got to get your home sold in 14 days. So probably during that negotiations, the house that they're negotiating on that they want to find first is going to start asking for a lot of other things because there's more risk associated with their offer. So suddenly they're having to offer more and maybe have to take away certain things like, hey, no appraisal contingency, or let's say no termite, or all these kind of other things. So they're starting to make concessions that are less favorable to them. Likewise, when they eventually do get their house on the market, now that they found that replacement property, if a buyer comes in and starts asking for a bunch of things, they're going to have to accept all those things. So suddenly the net on their sale is going down while the expense on their upleg is going up. And that's simply because they did it backwards based on the conventional wisdom that we all know how to get this done. So again, I understand what they're going through, and I've kind of given them an intro, but I need to, solidify this in such a way that's going to put this concern to bed. And so I have a perfect program. Again, you've done this before, that will ensure that you get top dollar for your home and keeps you from having to make unpleasant concessions. In addition, we can make sure the accepted offer includes a provision that you will not close on the sale of your home until you found a replacement property for the right terms and price. The best part of this program, if I'm unable to put everything together and you do not need to sell, it's very low risk for you. Does that sound like something that would be helpful? And so usually if that is the true objection, you go through that process and you've explained what that looks like, then yeah, they're comfortable. They're willing to move forward. So great, let's get started on some paperwork. Okay, so what other questions do you guys have, or is there other questions that you have?
So, is there, is it commonplace to recommend you camp out in a hotel room so the property's vacant, so that's easier to show, or a stage or whatever it is, until it sells, and then, go ahead and once you've got all the money and you maybe shopping around for other homes, is there something along those lines? What is the actual plan, and
Yeah,
often the case?
yeah. I mean, I wouldn't say that I like to look at, well, what are my clients' needs? If they're in a situation where, because you're going to have sometimes some clients and they're not even going to have to worry about selling the property in order for them to get another one. Let's say you're dealing with someone that has that kind of value. Then I would say make it too mutually exclusive. Go ahead and buy whatever replacement property you have, move out, and let's then do what we need to do with that. If they're not in the means to fully do that, you're kind of like going to a hotel. I don't necessarily like that because that's just more expense for them. And I can do things with regards to the listing to still give them number of showings and reduce that disruption. Now, the one thing I will say, and I think you're very, intuitive on, is that if we limit the amount of access to the property, that's going to have potentially adverse effects on a property that, let's say, has go direct anytime. So usually the way I like to do that is on the super box, I'll have there's a functionality for those of you who are newer agents called the CBS code, which is call before showing. Basically, it means that the listing agent has to provide whatever agent's coming in with a code. So you can set time periods and you can have the safety measure in place to say, hey, look, this is the time that you're allowed to go to the property. And so that way the sellers have a chance to do the dishes, clean up, and make sure they're not coming out of the shower when someone arrives. And the only way they'll be able to get in is if they have that code. The other thing that I would do is I would have a conversation with the seller about that importance and say, look, let's try to designate a couple of windows each day that you're going to say that people are going to come in, and we're going to create that window, because what we want is someone that can, anybody who is a ready, willing, and able buyer who's well qualified, able for them to get in and have access to that property. Now, sometimes, again, they may have some additional concerns and you'll have to work through each of those. So I think what you're suggesting would be, it would have to be very circumstantial. And I'm trying to think of a scenario where I probably could solve the problem without having to have them take on the additional cost of having to move out to, let's say, to a temporary space. So I would try to do that first. But there may be some reason why we can. If we ever run into that, then please let me know, Julius. Or if you run into that scenario with someone specific, then we'll try to work through and kind of figure out a solution.
Yeah, and it just surprises me that someone would be able to, if they're thinking to sell their place and maybe downsize or whatever it is. It seems kind of I don't know. Like I said, my experience is very little. It seems odd that they would buy another place while they still have their current place up for sale. Like, I don't know, a lot of people have the financial bandwidth or flexibility to do that.
Yeah, it's funny. A lot of people don't, and so in those scenarios, what we do is, like I said, we keep them in their property. We try to we do some prep, because one of the things I mentioned too, for people that can't do that before they sell, then what I try to do is I say, look, we've got to now convert your home into a commodity. And so what we want to do is we want to start the packing. We want to start getting that stuff in the garage, as a way to kind of, declutter the house, get a lot of the personal items out. Certainly all the important, valuable stuff we want put away, or like in the case of like grandma's chandelier, let's take that down. Let's get whatever we're going to replace up there. And then what we do is, like I said, then we come up with time frames and time windows that a agent who can bring a buyer in. And usually, like, what I've done is I'll maybe say, like, every day from 11 to 1 and from, let's say, 6 to 8, are what I'll put in the agent notes of when, or the showing instructions of when someone can schedule that time. And usually that's enough to give them, look, it's enough of a window that it's a defined time of inconvenience, and they know they've got safe space, during the rest of the day. And if we have it on a daily basis, then usually a highly motivated buyer within those 2 window periods will usually find a time. And I always say, also with the agents, I always will have something when, if I have that kind of restriction, I will say something like to the effect of, if you're unable within these time windows, call me and we'll see what we can work out. Because if it's a case where it's like, hey, I've got this really, highly qualified buyer, but they can only see the place at 9 a.m. next Tuesday, and that's, might otherwise be a convenience for my client, I would have a conversation with them, and I might even show up just to make sure, there's no issues that go up at that time. So does that answer your question, Julius? Okay, great. Any other questions?
I have a question.
Hey, Tricia.
Hi. I was wondering, if you stage someone's house, and where do they put all their stuff?
Oh, great question. So a lot of times the way staging companies work is 2 things. Now, again, every staging company has their own, but typically if the house is fully staged, the staging company will have provisions in their contract to say that furniture can't be used. So theoretically, they'll only stage a house that is quote unquote vacant, that kind of thing.
Oh, okay.
But staging companies will offer other services where they can take either like if the person is going to stay in it, they can do like where they'll kind of like do a decluttering and come up with certain accent pieces to kind of give the feel of a house like that, so they can still continue to live in it. And if they do that, then a lot of times if it's a single family residence, they'll put the stuff into the garage or that kind of thing, the things that they want to take out and reduce in the rooms and stuff to give the house the more appearance of an open space. A lot of times too, when I'm going through the listing presentation, and once we've signed off and that kind of stuff, one of the things I mentioned to them as we discuss or we go into this is that, this is a great opportunity to go through and figure out what you don't want to keep anymore, and to donate those things that you have value that you want to get rid of, because you can use that for tax purposes and so on and so forth. So it just makes the load of preparing the house for sale much easier. And plus, if you're going to move anyway, why pay to move something when you're going to just intend to throw it out to begin with? So does that answer your question, Tricia?
Yes, it does. And then I just have another similar question to add on to that. When people have estate sales, if they're moving, do they have those before or after they list the house for sale?
My recommendation would do before. My approach with listings is I don't want to put it live until it's ready to go and we've addressed everything. And the reason is because usually let's say if an estate sale has to occur, the seller wants to do that as part of that, I want to make sure that that we've had a chance to go through and figure out whatever it is they want to accomplish, and we get that done before we have the house on the market, versus someone who says, yeah, let's hurry up and get my house on the market. And then they say, well, we want to have an estate sale this weekend, we don't want any showings. And suddenly you're just burning that time on the market, and that house value is deteriorating as we're sitting there because we just simply can't get people in. So
Okay.
I would always do all of that stuff before we put the house onto the market. And keep in mind too, when we sign a listing contract, the regulation is that we simply register that listing, but we don't have to put the listing live on the market right away. We can, if our seller says, hey, look, I'm really want to get these things done, and I want to get an estate sale taken care of. I want to get some stuff thrown out. I want to do some painting. I want to do this, that, and the other to get the house ready. Great. Well, in fact, let's sign right now, and we'll have a schedule go on the market date that's out in the future, and I'll help you with getting those things done and getting the right people in here to make that happen for you. Okay. Anything else? Any other questions? Well, and then is there anything else after going through this process that you guys particularly liked or like to do a deeper dive in?
Well, I have a quick thing. I noticed that you use the word whenever you're saying, hey, I want to sell your home. And my AMP class recently, they pointed out that you want to use neutral terms such as house instead of home, so that they don't feel like don't associate some kind of negative connotations, like starting to treat it like a property, piece of property, like you say. And yeah, I just thought I'd bring that up.
Yeah, I mean, again, there's different ways that they right now they're saying, and yeah, you always want to be sensitive to the terminology. And again, with all of the terminology that I use, definitely put everything into your own words, and just even like with the objection handling, just try to recognize the pattern. But I would definitely would work these. And one of the things that I always do with any client that I deal with, you should always have a reflection period. If you go into a listing and it goes really well, you should have a reflection period and say, well, what worked on this? And how can I take that? Or I've also had situations where I've had a listing and off the cuff, I come up with an objection I've never had before. And I just have this, moment of inspiration. And I'm like, whoo, I want to save that. So you would definitely want to write those things down and then incorporate them and work them into your dialogue going forward. And this is a thing of constant, quality improvement. We always want to be working our craft and getting it better. So, like I said, these are examples of what you can use, but mostly what's most important is the structure. And then as you, adopt the structure to your own, the way that you sound and using your terminology, that's the way I would recommend it. It has to be authentic. It has to sound like it's coming from you. Otherwise, the challenge that you run into, and there's a little bit of, I was trying to, demonstrate structure as well. So I had to kind of like create these they're not exactly the way I would say everything. Some of the stuff I did for the point, but the principle of what we've talked about today and then the other classes goes to what I do in my own presentation. So, and again, but when you're actually in that moment in your own presentation, you want to be speaking with an authentic voice that is coming truly from, the way you see things and how you say things. Otherwise, it's going to come robotic.
And what really resonates with me, to answer your question, actually, is ever since you first brought up this topic like a few months ago, you said always sell based on value, not on price. Always try to justify your cost because you're adding that value. So always sell based on value, not price. I'm botching it now, but that's always in my head. I get the idea.
Well, that's a huge thing I think to internalize, because right now that's the market is heading towards, just so you guys know, the reason we're seeing the emergence of Zillows and all the online buyers and stuff, they're addressing a place in the market. And really what they're addressing is the fact that people have horrible experiences with real estate agents and they're kind of fed up. And so these companies are basically saying, well, if you're not going to get great service, we can offer a program that's online and can address a lot of these issues and give you something that's, either the same or better than what you've experienced for a lot less. And so we're going to be what we're going up against are the discounters. So we've got to position ourselves to be, hey, I'm going to be value. I'm here, to give you that hands-on feel that you're not going to get with something that's based off of the internet. Or like even in this marketplace, you have conventional agents who are non-online but are discounters. And one of the things I always loved using those guys, because I would have examples during my listing presentation where I would say, look, here's some examples of people who advertise locally that they'll sell any house for a flat fee. And look at the pictures, look at the houses, look at everything else. And when you look at them, they were just awful. There was just a lot of things that were textbook wrong with the way the property is. And the bottom line is these houses would sit longer on the market and they wouldn't get that much. And it's kind of like, well, you get what you pay for. So it's just, I really hope that that's one of the big takeaways that you guys do from these meetings and that you really internalize that because you're worth it. We have the tools that earn it. We just now need to craft each of your value propositions so that you can go out and actually see that return on investment when you go out there and apply your knowledge. Anything else?
Yeah, I have one question.
Yes, Christine.
With a traditional presentation like this one, or some of the material that we got from Coldwell Banker, which is more of the online stuff, how do you integrate some of the presentation that Coldwell Banker does, which are the online presentation?
Yeah, that's a great question. And yeah, this is where the art of real estate comes in. So like the way I would do it particularly for, if you haven't had many listings, I would start off by having like something like the Caldwell Banker presentation as sort of your base presentation. And then depending on how many transactions you have, I would then pepper in to that presentation, like using a binder. I would have a section where you would have your past successes and something that you can tell a story, about. It's about, how did I meet these clients? What do they want? What do they need? And how did I get them, these amazing results, or how was this experience particularly good? So again, going back, that Caldwell Banker presentation is going to work to kind of create that baseline, and will give you some talking points. Another way that you might want to do it as well is kind of like, remember when Nicole showed her example of hers? That might be a great pre-listing. You might take some of something like what she did, and maybe pull out some of the slides to get into the specifics of how you do things, but just kind of sort of like talk about the benefits of what our value brings. And you might do that as a pre-listing packet that you drop off at the house. So like, for instance, you might be meeting next Saturday or something, a week from now, and you may swing by and say, hey, look, I want to drop this off, and this will help you, come up with maybe think about some questions when we meet next weekend. And then that way they kind of get the sales flavor of the benefits they're getting in a real pretty, nicely done package. And then when you sit down, most of my listing presentations are really a lot about talking and really going over the comps, and then talking about what I put in for them based on after I've had, a clear understanding of what they want to do.
Yeah, that's great. I think that would work well.
Yes. So, and again, this is the art of real estate, is you have to make it what makes sense for you and what works for your client. And so I would mix it up and try different things as well. All right. You're welcome. Any other questions? Well, the only other thing that I would suggest is, for those of you who took the time, as you go through this process of building out your presentation, I would do a couple of things. I would continue to work on your presentation, get it put together. And I would, if you have another agent in the office that you, let's say, work really well with, why not create like a listing presentation mastermind between the two of you, where you sit down and each one of you gives a presentation to the other agent. And that way you can hone your craft. You want to have a critical eye and a third party eye on that, and kind of deal with, some of the questions or some of the issues that you may not that you've not come across before. Plus, if you can't find anybody, if you put your presentation together and you want to give it, I'm happy to do that as well. So you just make an appointment with me. I'll be happy to sit down. I'm going to, give you tough questions, but it's a safe workspace. Let's have the tough questions happen in my office, or, wherever we do it. So that way you can go through and test to see how it is. And that will give you the confidence that when you're sitting down in front of someone, that you'll be able to do it and have, a more refined answers and presentation. All right, then. Well, thank you guys so much for coming. And if you have any other follow-ups, or you think of something, don't hesitate to reach out to me or Nicole. And we just really appreciate you guys being part of this. And we'll continue to work on, we'll probably do additional classes on specific items and kind of parse this out. But definitely I would love to get some more of your feedback. If you want to send me an email offside, like of some specific topics you'd like to go in a deeper dive, and we can do that as well. So
yeah, me and Chuck will definitely be talking about that and trying to bring you more specific things, probably after the holiday, if not right before the holidays. Sorry.
Yeah, no,
Good job.
Good job. Sounds great. All right, guys. Well, thank you guys so much. And we'll talk to you